Yeah. Okay, we're dropping cheese. So we're dropping this weekend with her cousins. They have there will be 4 dogs in her house. And Lucy is by far the youngest, and she just goes from dog to dog, kissing them all until one, like.
Oh, I love, you get to love doing it. Yeah, no, we need to, I know, yeah. Maybe we can have lunch or
Only because we was in San Diego all the time. Although I haven't had to use it. Recently, just because we've been able to get out and get her running. But I think we're gonna have to pick that back up this year for sure. But yeah, it's working out really well. It's always a drag when you show up there no other months. It's like, hey,
The Claflin one, they put new fencing in, and it's made a huge difference. Yeah, I took people that's
I have a 2-year-old walker, Australian Shepherd, very probably smart as I am.
Can't be that way.
I just learned everything that I've ever done. I run out of things to think of. I always make sure.
I didn't bring my computer.
He's still a puppy.
My daughter's so
Very eager to hurt things. He hurts my
Recording in progress.
Good evening, one and all. Those of you who are watching on TV and those who are watching through virtual link Zoom. Welcome to the inaugural meeting of the Zoning and Planning Committee for the 2024-2025 term. My name is Daniel Blaker. I'm the Vice Chair of the committee, and we are joined tonight in person by, I'm the chair of the committee. Sorry about that, John. I didn't mean to usurp your role. Joined by John Oliver, Vice Chair, duly recognized and properly identified, and Councilor Susan Albright, member of the committee, Councilor Vicki Danberg, member of the committee, Councilor Rena Getz, member of the committee, virtually by Councilor Joshua Krinsman, a member of the committee, and I believe Councilor David Kalis, member of the committee. I don't know if Councilor Wright is here, but we are also joined by a non-member of the committee, but welcome, Councilor Farrell, and also we're joined by several members of the planning board as well as the planning staff, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves in a minute, but I want to just give a sense of process that I hope that we can follow tonight. This is really a meeting designed to get a sense of some issues that the committee can address going forward in the new term, before the budget and after the budget. For the members of the public who are watching but do not follow the city calendar, traditionally, usually sometime around Patriots Day, the mayor presents the budget, and then the council is occupied for a period of time in going through that process of review that the budget involves. And then we have summer, and there's a lighter load of committee meetings, but then resume again in the fall. So part of the objective for tonight's discussion is to get a start on thinking about issues that the committee would like to address so that we can frame the discussion as efficiently and effectively as possible. Attached to the agenda, there's a long memo from me and the vice chair, Councilor Oliver, about various issues that we'd like to take up. But before we do, I'd like to just ask those members of the committee who are here, and then I want to recognize the members of the planning board and the planning staff and the other city staff who are attending online, to just identify themselves and say a word about themselves, because I think this is an opportunity for the public to get to know us a little bit, for those who are not follow this on a regular basis. And as one other just bit of information, I've asked the clerk of the committee, Ms. Norton, to just bring our name cards in for those of us who are attending, because those online have names on their image on the screen, but those of us who are here may be well known to each other and maybe to some other people, but may not be as obvious to the public as who is attending. So that way, at least people will have a sense of who's what. So you want to turn your sign just a little bit towards the camera, that would help. And then we've got that covered. So let me just start by saying, again, I'm Lyle Baker. I'm the ward counselor for Ward 7. This is my 41st year as a member of the city council. I've been a member of the zoning and planning committee, I think, since its inception. But it's my great privilege to be the chair for this term. And in my day job, I am a law professor at Suffolk University Law School. John?
Sure. John Oliver. I've been with city council now for 3.5 almost years, I believe. This is my first go around with ZAP. Looking forward to it. I am one of the 2 at-large counselors from Ward 1. Talking about a day job, I'm a marketing consultant, so a lot of this is still new to me. And I'm sure those of you who are more versed in this are going to be able to correct me throughout the term. So I just ask for your patience in that capacity. But other than that, Raina, how about you?
I am Raina Getz, and I am an at-large counselor from Ward 5. I've been watching zoning and planning for quite a while, and I think I'm pretty known to the people here in the room. And I have lived in Newton almost 30 years, and I was a founding member of the Waban Area Council and the last president of that council.
Thank you. I forgot to mention this is being audio and video recorded, correct? Okay. So, Albright.
Okay, I'm Susan Albright. I'm at-large counselor from Ward 2. This is my 21st year on the council, which is a long time. And let's see, besides being a mother of 2 sons that are now grown up and on their own, sort of, I've had 2 major, no, they're never on their own. I've had 2 sort of major different parts of my life. One where I worked on statewide services for developmentally disabled people. And that's actually where my interest in housing began, because that was at the time when we were developing community residences for the first time, trying to deinstitutionalize them and leave handicapped folks and get them into community programs. And the other half has been information technology at Tufts Medical School, where we developed an educational database for medical education. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Hi, I'm Vicki Danberg. I am counselor at large from Ward 6, which is Newton Center and Highlands. And this is my also 21st year on the council. And in fact, I've been on ZAP for all but 1 term. There was 1 term that I went on finance and decided that ZAP was much more fun, and came back here. In my other lives, I started out as a high school teacher at Brookline High, and now I am a healthcare administrator.
Thank you. Let me go to the online members of the committee. Let me go to Ward 4 Councilor Princeman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Josh Princeman, Ward 4 Councilor at Large. If I'm not mistaken, this begins my 7th year on the City Council. With any luck, after another, 34 years, Mr. Chair, I'll know how to do it and what I'm doing. That one will kick in.
Well, you at least you know what your name is in your role. That's better than I did tonight.
Yeah. Good. Day job. So I sort of had some legal training. I was a lawyer by trade, worked for the Massachusetts Senate for several years in the Senate Counsel's office, among other places. And now I handle state and federal government affairs for Boston Medical Center Health System.
Thank you very much.
That's me. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Vice President Kalis?
David Kalis, Counselor at Large from Ward 8. This is my second time on ZAP. I've come over on waivers from finance. I think I agree with Counselor Danberg that this is more fun. So I was 8 years on ZAP when I first joined 13 years ago, the council, and there was a lot going on. That's just as there is now, and I enjoy it. So I'm looking forward to coming back. In the day, I work in marketing for financial services firms, and that's it. I do wonder, Josh Princeman, how you got that great placement there with your name tag. I mean, you're not even there, and front and center.
And Counselor Wright.
Thank you. I'm Pam Wright, Ward 3, Counselor at Large. This is my 5th year. I've been on ZAP the whole time. I enjoy it. I enjoy zoning. My background for over 20 years, I was practicing engineering, electrical engineering, and now I do some property management.
So thank you very much. And Councilor Farrell, you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Stephen Farrell. I've been on the council for 8 days now, and I'm very much looking forward to learning and listening and participating on those committees that I've been assigned to. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other councilors online that I haven't recognized? Thank you all. I hope that your predictions of having fun, those of you who mentioned that, are proved to be true, but we'll see where we go. We are fortunate tonight. We've been joined also by the Planning and Development Board, and I would like to recognize there are several members here, and Mr. Brown, and let's see, Kelly?
Yep, hi.
Yep, there you are.
Should we just, each of us introduce ourselves individually?
Yes,
would that be what you'd like?
The Planning and Development Board for the members of the public has an important role for this committee and the council, because it advises us on all zoning amendments.
So as the chair said, my name is Kelly Brown. I am now the chair of the Planning and Development Board for about a year. Been on the board for 5 years. I'm a campus planner at MIT for a day job. Peter, why don't you?
I'm Peter Doringer. I guess I've just finished about a decade with the planning board and several terms as chair or associate chair, vice chair. My day job used to be as a professor of economics at BU. I also was a associate dean for the Faculty of Arts and Sciences for a while. I do a variety of public policy activities, some of them related to older workers, some of them related to legal disputes, such as the US-Canada fishing boundary dispute. I also am a labor arbitrator and fact finder.
Thank you very much. And we have, are there other members online? We have several members in the room. Ms. Dane. Oh, yes. Ms. Dane.
Hi, nice to see you all. I'm Amy Dane. I've been on the planning board for more than a year now, and I am an independent consultant in public policy research and writing, and I've focused a lot of my research and writing in recent years on zoning policy, which I've been working on zoning policy since about 2004, and I've worked with a bunch of different think tanks in Greater Boston. And in addition to zoning policy, I've spent some time looking at how cities and towns use data in public management, like at the department levels. So it's nice to be a part of this.
Thank you very much for coming, those of you. Mr. McCormick, you want to introduce or go and read us off here?
I'm Kevin McCormick.
We have one more planning board member who would like to.
Well, I was coming back to Mr. Heath, but at the end.
Yes, hello, my name is Lee Breckenridge.
Oh, Lee, I didn't see you. My apologies.
Hello, I must be off the side of the screen.
No, it's
Anyway,
decided as good as it should be.
I am recently retired as a law professor at Northeastern University School of Law, where I taught environmental law and land use. And many decades before that, I was chief of the environmental division at the Massachusetts Attorney General's office.
Thank you very much. And now let me try again, Mr. McCormick, and then I'll come back to the planning director.
Kevin McCormick. I'm vice chair of the planning board. I'm now retired. My last job was working for the city of Cambridge in their community development department. It was coordinating federal funds towards housing, towards both large developments. Also, we had a program to help eligible homeowners fix up their homes and a number of other projects. I've been with the board now about 5 years.
Thank you. Ms. Malinsky.
Hi, everyone. I think I've been on the board about 6 years, and I'm the planning board rep to the CPC right now. I spent the last 12 years at Harvard at the Joint Center for Housing Studies. I'm a housing researcher. My area of focus is on aging and housing. And I'm trained as a planner. Before that, I was here at the city doing a lot of zoning work.
If you didn't hear that, she used to work for the city. And Mr. Heath, you want to introduce yourself and then your staff who are here?
Sure, be happy to. And why don't I start with the staff? I know there are a couple folks in the room. Why don't we start there and then I'll introduce some other folks.
Okay. So, but just say a word about yourself first, if you would.
Be happy to. So going on the theme here, this is my 8th year as planning director in Newton. I started in 2016, and it's my 38th year as a planner. Previous to Newton, I started with the Boston Redevelopment Agency. There was a story recently about Steve Coyle. That's who I started under. Then I went to work for the town of Weymouth, Massachusetts. And right before Newton, I worked in the city of Pawtucket, Rhode Island. So why don't I pass things over to Jennifer, who's in the room.
Jennifer Kyra, Deputy Director for Planning. This is my day job and sometimes night job. I've been with the city for a little over 6 years now. About 11 years total, municipal government planning, previously worked for the city of LA, and prior to that, career in civil engineering.
Thank you. Good evening. John Sisson. I'm the Economic Development Director. I've been with the city for 17 months. I've been working in economic development for about 10 years. I was in the private sector before that. And I live in Four Corners and have 2 boys who graduated, one from Newton North and one from Newton South. So I'm paying 2 college tuitions right now. So I'm very happy to be working with the city of Newton.
Okay.
Hi everyone, Zachary Lamel, the head of the long range planning team. I've been with the city for a little over 4 years now. I'm a landscape architect as well as an urban planner. Spent all my professional life really working in municipal government with some brief stints in the private sector. Before this, I was in New York City working for either their planning department or their Department of Housing, Preservation, and Development.
Great. And on land also, we have a representative of the law department, Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Name's Andrew Lee. I'm a senior assistant city solicitor. Been with the city for a bit over 5 years now, providing legal support and advice to all the departments as well as the commissions and council, including ZAP for the past 5 years. Prior to being with the city, I was in private practice and happy to be here and provide further legal support.
Thank you very much. And then we have the Commissioner of Inspectional Services, Mr. Ciccarello.
Thank you, Chairman. Anthony Ciccarello, Commissioner of Inspectional Services. Been working in the city for just over 10 years. And prior to that, I was a self-employed general contractor for 30 plus years.
Thank you very much. And you
I also have my colleague here, Andy Mavrillis.
Andy Mavrillis, formerly zoning enforcement, code enforcement for the city of Newton for almost 3 years, 2.5 years or so. And now I'm very privileged to serve alongside this guy as the deputy building commissioner. I too had a private contracting business for many, many years in Boston, greater Boston area.
Thank you for spending time with us, and we hope that we will have an opportunity to hear more from you. And finally, I want to introduce Ms. Norton, who is the clerk of the committee, and if there's anything that, have I missed somebody?
Here's our planning staff.
Mr. Chair, I've got a couple other members.
Oh,
of the
yes,
planning
sure.
staff.
Yeah, please.
Briefly, Olivia and then Molly.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Would you introduce them?
Sure. Go ahead, Olivia.
Yeah, hi. I'm Olivia. I'm the Community Engagement Specialist in Long Range Planning. I joined in March last year, so I'm almost 1 year in. I was born and raised in Newton, finished up a master's in planning and landscape architecture before joining the planning department. And I work to help connect the community to the projects we're working on in the planning department. I work closely with Barney, Jen, and Zach, who you've all probably become pretty familiar with in the last few years. So that's what I'm up to.
Thank you very much. And anybody else? Because I'm not sure I can see him clearly. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Molly Hutchings. I'm the Community Preservation Program Manager. I've been with the City of Newton for about 1.5 years and was previously the Chief Preservation Planner, so some of you might know me from that. And I think that's about it.
All right, Molly, thank you very much. And again, I just want to recognize Ms. Norton, who is the clerk of the committee and has helped put together the agenda and the various materials that you've seen tonight. And thank all of you for taking the time to come and listen to the conversation. And we hope to try and sort our way through what we can do in the committee in the coming term. For those who are watching at home that don't have access to the documents attached to the agenda, what I hope that we will be able to do is talk about a variety of topics in a somewhat general scoping way. There are some specific items that have been docketed already, and then Councilor Albright and Danberg have also docketed some items very recently which fit into different categories. So what I have for the members of the committee that Ms. Norton will take us through is an expanded version of the memo that was in the packet, but includes all of their items in order of the items that were in the original memo. So we'll have one document to refer to rather than multiple ones. They have a memo that they prepared, which is available to the committee, and I will make sure it's attached to the report so that that is also part of the record. But what we tried to do before the meeting is to make sure that we've got all of the issues that people thought were important to bring up. Now, we're not going to decide any of these matters tonight. I want to be clear that this is really a conversation about where we go in terms of planning and the issues that we need to reflect upon. And for information of everyone, the topic titles that we have for here are current zoning, the MBTA Communities Act, which a response, which is a specific subset of zoning, which was done in response to a state statute, an issue, category of measurement and reporting to try and keep track of what we're doing, housing as a subtext as well, although it's obviously subsumed in the others, enforcement work by the ISD, because that's an important part of the role of this committee is to not only review the budget, but oversight of the departments, including planning and ISD, which are part of our jurisdiction. Energy conservation and climate, which as you all who followed the work of the committee have known has been an important part of our charter, so to speak. Economic development, community preservation, and again, thank you very much for being here tonight for that. Just boards and commissions are generally part of our responsibility for appointments. Responses to state legislation, if any, that if we want to make any responses. There's a general recodification process that goes on in the committee, in the community every 5 years, which is to update the comprehensive ordinances we have, although they're being done on an as amended basis, but there is an official version, just to see where we are. A possible topic is public education, because again, those of us who work in this committee area are familiar with it, but the public may not know as much about how zoning works and how we can explain it, although we have, fortunately now, this, not just now, but in the past, but also the community engagement process. Talk about the committee process itself, any pre-budget questions, because there are matters that we can try and get ahead of before the budget conversation. And two items that, really one item is parking minimums, which we haven't talked about. Parking is a part of another item, but not in a general sense. And then finally, there are calendar items on the committee memo about when we formally meet, and also if we have to have special meetings, we can do that, but my objective is to try and avoid those if we can, so everyone has a sense of what we're doing and when. So, anybody have any comments on just the process so far? Okay, since I usually ask the process question, I just thought I'd. Can't do that anymore.
Well, they can, but I don't know who's gonna answer them.
Yeah, Councilor Wright.
I have a question.
Yes.
This is Pam.
Yes, Councilor Wright.
So I was waiting, I have a bunch of topics that I'd like to include. Should I send those to you to include it on this list, or should I just docket items, or how?
No, I think if you have items, let's bring them up as we come. If they fit into any of these categories, raise them at that point so that we make sure we discuss them. And if they're anything that we haven't discussed by the time we get through that you want us to discuss, but you certainly can docket anything. And one of the things that I want to indicate, and it's obviously up to the council as a whole, but because this is an introductory conversation, and you may have items and other people may have items, the docket deadline closes in 20 minutes. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. It closes in 21 minutes.
And there's a new docketing software, which I'm just trying to learn my way through. But I would certainly recommend to the president that if you have late filed items, that in order to just get into our agenda list, that you have the opportunity to do that before the next council meeting. So I would try and get them done perhaps by Wednesday evening, just so that the clerk's office can manage those. But I would just raise your items as we go. If they're in this list, and if they're not in the list, let me know what they are. Does that work?
Sure. Are we going to go through these lists in detail, one at a time?
Yeah, I just wanted to get the general categories out to people so that we could have a chance to, so people would know where we were. Let me go down the list then. The first item is one that at least I'm very much interested in, and we have a number of people citizens have asked us, and the basic question is what modifications can be made to existing residential zoning to reduce the incidence of demolition of older homes that are usually more affordable than the new ones that replace them. And Mrs. Norton has now shared the screen so you can see these items as we go through. This is one I just should explain because citizens have asked me and spoken to me, and I assume others have had the similar experience, that they're concerned that some of our older housing stock that may not be historic is still being torn down and replaced by much more expensive housing. And the question is, can we preserve any of that older housing stock, and if so, how? I don't presume to know the answer to that, but that's the concern, and that's why this item is here. Any comments on that?
So one of the items that Councilor Stanford and I put in should go under that topic. It's under inclusionary zoning.
Okay.
But it has to do with changing the setbacks in the multi-resident zones. That was one that we carried over from last term.
Okay.
And it could affect preserving older houses.
All right, so that, just so we are all on literally the same page, where's that in the
It's on the
expanded
second page under inclusionary zoning, but it really belongs under that topic right there.
All right, so everybody had to look on second page 2. It says Councilor Albright, Lipoff, Wright, and Leary.
No, not that one. It's there, this one.
Oh, this one. Farther down, it's the one that says Councilors Albright, Danberg, Kritzman, and Leary seeking a discussion with the planning department to consider ordinance amendments that would revise the metrics in multi-resident zones, MR1, MR2, MR3 zones, to regulate the size of new buildings better, enable a wider range of housing options close to public transit, and better incentivize preservation and renovation of existing housing stock.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for pointing that out. Comments from members of the committee?
I have one,
Yes,
or two.
Councilor Wright?
So, right now you said current zoning, but current zoning includes VCOD, correct?
Well, I think to be candid, I was thinking of the existing zoning, not the BCOD, but that's my,
But that's existing because we passed it.
yes, that's true. So.
So two things I'd like to do on this, and then also I would like to get feedback from the law department, is increase usable open space and also increase MRT lot frontage. Now, my question for the law department is, when we're increasing the number of units, it's a simple majority. If we have a whole package together and it's overall an increase of units, but in some places it's taking away, is it still a simple majority, or do we have to vote on each separate item? For when we did vote for the VCOD, it was taken as a package.
So let me suggest that because that was part of the community, MBTA communities,
Yep.
I'd just hold on that for a little bit until we get to that point, because I think that's part of that. But Mr. Lee, if you can think about the question of the zoning vote threshold on how we approach that, that would be useful.
Mr. Chair, I understand you'd like to wait until it's, in the right category, but I can answer it fairly quickly, at least for right now, which is, the law department would have to see the exact proposal in order to make a determination of whether or not it needs to be separated into individual items that are voted separately, what the quantum of vote would be. So until we see the actual proposal, we wouldn't be able to make a determination of exactly what the voting threshold is. But once we do, we'd be able to advise on it.
What would push it to be individually versus not as a whole?
Councilor Wright, just for a moment. Let me just clarify for the public that zoning amendments conventionally require 2/3 vote of the city council, 16 votes out of 24. Housing-related items can be passed with a majority of those rather than 16. So, Councilor Wright?
Oh, I was just wondering what's the rules, or what predicts if it's as a whole versus singular, just to get an idea how they break that up as a voting package.
I'm not sure what you mean as a whole or singular. The question comes down to whether or not what is being proposed allows multifamily by right or by special permit in certain areas. So again, we'd have to see exactly what the proposal is and make sure that everything that is in there for the most part as a package is there to promote purpose for the amendments to Chapter 48.
Okay, this was all for by right multifamily, but it's taking away some and adding some in other places. So the delta number is an increase, but there is some changes.
Okay, so.
Right, and like I said, we'd have to take a look, Council Wright, to see exactly what the proposals are to make a determination of what the appropriate quantum of vote would be.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other comments on this particular issue?
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Yes, who's got a hand up? Yes, Councilor Kalis, I'm sorry.
So I think, I don't know what you're looking for here, but my only comments are both of these items that you just brought up, the one that was that Albright and Danberg docketed, as well as this first one, are very important, I think. I do think they're somewhat different in their objectives. The first one really focusing in on existing residential zoning, and the second one more zoning, more options of more living space options. But I think they can be taken up together. I just like the first one because it is open-ended and allows the planning department to bring ideas that we might not have thought of before, and that's what I think is really important.
Okay, and Councilor Getz?
Yeah, I actually would appreciate hearing from the planning department what other communities are doing, in terms of bringing down demolition. But we had, I don't know if you remember when Amy Angiolo had proposed any demolition would then, rebuild would require new lot standards. do you remember
Yeah.
that? You know, it was it never
There,
made
there
the
were
light of day,
some
but-
proposals that occurred in the
Yeah.
past.
Yeah, so
But
that kind of historic would be good to look at, just, in terms of just looking back and, because there've been some attempts at this previously.
Okay, well, assuming we get docket items, then we can ask the department to give us a response along those lines. I wouldn't ask them to give us a response tonight unless they feel there's something that we ought to know, but just to go through this. Okay, any further discussion on this? Because these can be framed as docket items after we've had a chance to discuss it and think about these questions.
I have one other question, and I don't know if it's in here or if it's somewhere else, is I know a lot of other communities have housing production plans. I'd like to take a look at that again.
Okay, when we get to housing, can you hold that and we come back to that?
Yeah.
Okay. And Ms. Norton is going to keep us honest to make sure that we capture all of these in the right place, so for the report, but thank you for that. The manufacturing zone study, remember that at the end of the last term, we were talking about that, and the current status and plan next steps. Is there, I think, Councilor Oliver, you had some thoughts about this. You want to explain this item a little?
Yeah, certainly. So it was kind of a two-step process. The first one was making sure that everyone's up to speed with what we have been doing or what we have done already with California street manufacturing zoning, and then to bring updates forward for more specific to Nonantum. And I believe that there's also a question regarding the manufacturing zones throughout the city, and I think one of the ones that I've heard mentioned a couple of times is in Auburndale, if I recall correctly. So I've got several notes on this, and I don't know if either of my Ward 1 councilors are with us tonight, but we've talked about this in the past, and I'll be bringing that forward here in the next week or so, because I would like to get that back on the agenda, because I think we committed to a Q1 resolution, or kind of bringing that back up in Q1, or at least within the first few months of the term.
Okay, and I think Councilor Albright, you and Councilor Danberg had something on this too?
We referred that to the Ward 1 councilors and said, would you like to do it?
Okay.
So that's what.
Yeah, since we're starting with the manufacturing districts in Ward 1, and I think that they're by far the largest and most important ones that we need to deal with right now.
Especially when you think about it in combination with California Street.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, a docket item could be framed around that after you reflect on it, if the committee's interested in that. Go to the next page. This is an item that I thought we had talked about, but this is a general framing. Response to grade changes in new construction resulting in homes elevated next to neighboring properties that are not part of the natural topography. This is an issue that we've had in the past. We've tried to deal with. We used to have an ordinance that limited grade changes of more than 3 feet. We got rid of that because we felt that it was not doing the job, but we are understanding that there are situations where properties are being modified in the process of construction, so to change the topography in a way that adversely affects the neighboring properties, but there's no vehicle to look into that appropriately. And then I think Councilor Albright, you and Councilor Danberg have an item. Let me just read that, and then you can tell a little bit about the background for that. Councilors Albright, Lipoff, Wright, and Leary requesting a discussion with the Planning Department to address concerns relative to the trend of significantly raising grade elevations on lots, using retaining walls, terracing, and other means to add soil to conceal a raised basement, which can lead to new buildings that are significantly taller than nearby houses in the area and cause denuding of wooded areas and increased stormwater runoff. This discussion may result in an ordinance change to Chapter 30, Section 5.42, which will require special permit or other means of city review of all retaining walls over 4 feet on site. So just for the information of the public, what's just been referenced is an existing provision that does have some control over retaining walls, but we've seen some cases, some rather extraordinary retaining walls in other contexts. You want to say something about that, Councilor?
Well, I think this is a problem all over the city, and I think that's why so many different wards are represented here, but there was one in particular in Ward 1, which really took the
Right on
cake.
Washington?
Yeah, I mean, it's a retaining wall the size of a building, and that poor man that was living next door to it was just beside himself, and there was nothing to be done about it. So it requires some careful study, so that this doesn't happen again.
Yeah, we've had many in Ward 8 as well, so it's it's an issue across the city.
Okay, any other comments? Again, the members of the planning board or planning staff, if there is something that occurs to you want to be recognized, please let me know, but I'll just move along. Next item is what modifications might be made to our inclusionary zoning ordinance to respond to smaller than 6-unit development. Just as background, we have an ordinance that requires developments of larger than 6 units to provide some affordable housing component, but there's been a question about what do we do for projects that are 6 units or less. And then Councilor Danberg, you have two items here. Let's see, Councilor Danberg, and it says and.
It's open for anyone else to co-docket if you'd like to co-docket.
But requesting a discussion with the Planning Development Department and Newton Housing Partnership about the city's inclusionary zoning ordinance and possible amendments to the ordinance to include 4 to 6 units, including raising the requirements for the number of affordable units in large developments. Want to say anything more than that?
I think that pretty much explains it. We have spoken quite often about whether 7 units as the minimum number in order to have IZ kick in is the right number or not. And so I think it warrants a discussion about including 4 to 6 units.
So I'd like to, this is one that I totally agree with the intent, but Councilor Danberg, Albright, Chairman Baker, we were all on the committee when we discussed this 6 years ago, and Planning Department had done a very large study that indicated 7 was the number, and we all wanted it lower. So I'm wondering what's changed that we think 4 to 6 could be the number now. I just want to make sure we're going with our eyes wide open. Like, we might not make any progress on this, and we had spent a lot of time on that, if those folks remember.
Yes, Councilor Kalos, thank you for bringing that up. I don't think that there was a definitive analysis done. We kind of looked at it back of the envelope and decided that 7 was where we where we could safely put it at this point. But I think that it warrants looking into it a bit more, because I'd like to know whether other communities, for example, have their IZ including fewer units than 7.
So this is an item, obviously, we can get into detail. I just want to get a scoping session, but let me recognize Councilor Wright and then.
You're on mute, Pam.
I think Mr. Heath might want to answer this first, and then I'll add.
Mr. Heath?
Yeah, I was just going to say that the timing is appropriate to relook at our IZ ordinance. We had said when we passed it originally, and Councilor Kalis is correct, we had a very extensive study done by RKG to find the right metric for the IZ ordinance, because it is very tricky territory, because you could end up setting the standard such that you don't get any affordable housing units. So our plan, and we can talk more about this with the committee, was to do both kind of a look back at the ordinance to see how it performed in the past 5 years, and also take a look, given current economic conditions, what is appropriate moving forward. There are a number of communities that you may have read about in the paper recently that have looked at this: Boston, Somerville, So this is on our work program for the upcoming year.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Wright?
Yeah, that was pretty much what I was saying. I thought this year was our 5th year look back on the IZ, and this can be included in all of this. And I think Boston just lowered their IZ limit too. I think they brought that down.
Okay, so we've got some historical data and analysis and see where we go from here. Okay? Anybody else on this? All right, then Councilor Danberg, you have another one, requesting discussion and possible amendment to require the developers and property managers provide training for their employees regarding bias towards residents of inclusionary, IZ is inclusionary
Yes.
zoning, I'm sorry, inclusionary zoning units, and how to mitigate this bias. You want to say a word about the background to this?
The background is just that this is a topic that has been in the news, and it might make some sense for us to have a discussion about it.
Okay, any comments from anybody on this one? Councilor Albright.
I'll only add that the Fair Housing Committee was brought in, was it from Cambridge? A study from Cambridge that was done to assess whether there was bias, and they felt that training was necessary. We can get that study as part of the work that we do.
Okay, all right, thank you. And then this is the next item on the page, it's on the screen, is the one we already talked about, which is the change in the MR. For the public's information, city has various residential zones of differing lot sizes and density. MR is the shorthand for multi-residence. So this is what the reference to that item refers to. Any other comments on this sort of section? All right, then let's talk about the MBTA communities. Again, for the information of the public, the city went through, and the planning department assisted the city council through the zoning and planning committee to pass at the end of last term a very significant change in our zoning to allow multifamily as of right in a number of village centers, which is referred to as a response to the MBTA Communities Act in shorthand. It's a longer title. But under that, the first question is, are there adjustments needed to the MBTA communities overlay zoning text and maps to comply with state guidelines? We passed something which we understand is being reviewed by the state for compliance, and we don't know the answer to their, to their review process yet. Perhaps the planning director can give us some guidance, or Mr. Lamel and Ms. Kyra, on what is happening. But if they come back and say, this needs adjustment, then we need to be able to think about how to respond to that. Mr. Heath or your colleagues, can you update us on where we are with that process?
Yeah, I'll defer to Jennifer and Zach.
Sure.
Mr. Lamel?
Sure. So we're waiting for essentially a complete package to submit to the state, but we have, that's particular for those we've been speaking with. There's the zoning that the city passed, and that has been submitted. In addition to that, because of our inclusionary zoning ordinance, we have to submit an economic feasibility analysis that our zoning and our inclusionary zoning, or the MBTA, the village center zoning being used to satisfy the MBTA requirements and the inclusionary zoning ordinance all work together. We've submitted Part A. We need to submit Part B, which is being done by the Massachusetts Area Planning Council Committee, MAPC, and they and us have been in talks with the state. And so when that complete package is submitted, then the official review will begin.
And do you have any sense of when is the MAPC working on it now, or do you have any sense when they're going to get a response to us?
As soon as possible, as I said to you and just for everyone else in the room, MAPC is doing this work for a variety of the rapid transit communities that have submitted. That their deadlines were the end of the year, and they had some computer and technical issues at the end of last year that set them back.
So I guess we stay tuned, department.
Stay tuned.
By January, they have committed to having it by January 21st, because that would be 30 days from when we submitted the zoning to the state, and the state has a 30-day sort of initial completeness review process. And MAPC has been working closely with the state so that they understand these things will be coming in a little later. but within that 30-day period.
So we might, by February, have some sense of where we are, or is that too
We'll
far
have the
out?
MAPC study. I don't think we'll have a response from the state yet
Okay.
by February. Maybe later in February, but it could take a couple months.
And I just want to point out that Councilor Wright, and attached to the agenda was a background memo that she had done about some of the ways that this information could be computed, and it's just attached, but is not, we're not planning to get into an extensive discussion of that. It's just that that is information for everybody. Councilor Wright, you want to say something more on this at this point?
You're muted.
You're muted. Your hand was up, and I assume.
I keep muting myself because of my coughing. Well, a couple other things. So first, I thought a copy of what was going to be submitted to the state was going to be in the Friday packet. Could we get a copy of everything that was submitted?
I didn't recall that, but I can, Mr. Linnell, can you respond to that?
Our plan is and has always been to submit in the packet and to the council and to the public a complete package, and unfortunately, we don't have one yet. We just would like to submit everything as one complete package.
So that would,
We're just missing the response from the MAPC, and that's it?
Correct.
Okay. And so here are the two items that I wanted to put in there is, so what we've talked about before, and this will, which I would believe will reduce tear downs, is increasing the minimum with lot frontage, and that doesn't have any delta change in unit numbers, but it should decrease tear downs. And adaptive reuse is actually, you get more numbers than tear downs. And then the other item, which I'd like to, talk about, is increased usable open space in MRT. This will give you more room for trees, and as we know from flooding and trees help mitigate, climate and all the flooding that we're having right now. So those are two areas I'd like to add in or look at, and I can docket something if you'd like.
So these are adjustments regardless of what the state response is, but these are things that you would recommend. And any other comments on that? These are just specific changes to setbacks and some adaptive reuse, and also the open space requirement, as I hear you. Is that correct?
Well, it's not setbacks, it's the minimum lot frontage and
I'm sorry.
and then
Okay.
open space requirements, yeah.
I want to be accurate, just so we get that in the report.
Can I just add one
Yes,
thing?
Councilor Holden.
So I don't know if this requires a docket item or not, but I know the planning staff had promised to give us quarterly updates on, who's coming in to ask for, who's interested in creating something in one of our villages that's part of the NPA community program, and who's actually going for a permit. So just to keep us up to date on what's actually going on. Is quarterly a good number? Yeah.
Okay, so you'd like to be able to sort of an update on what's happened as a result, right?
It's kind of meant to be part of the measurement and reporting.
Measuring and reporting, actually, we've got that.
They overlap for sure.
Right, that's true. And the third item on the list, just on the page, is what is the status of the financial viability study? And how is it being conducted? And that's, you've already responded to that, Mr. Lamel, so I think we know where that is. Next major category is measurement and reporting. And this is a very broad statement, which is what should be collected and reported on, how frequently, and how should the information be shared? So Councilor Oliver, you know more about this than I do.
Yeah, I think that line is my fault, or I wrote it. But really, the idea here is to, as Councilor Albright just mentioned, how do we make sure that as a city, we are identifying what it is we want to measure it, report out on it, and put that data someplace where people can find it. Because I think I'm one of many people who have a slight bee in our bonnet, if I can quote or use that particular analogy or reference. It's really hard to find information on the city's website. even for people who know where to go looking for it. So it'd be great if we could figure that out as part of this topic. Within the term, I think that's certainly within our reach, was the intent here. How should the information be shared? And then collectively, we can figure out what those metrics are, either with, some numbers from the planning department, from economic development. It can span anything from MBTA, non-MBTA, inclusionary zoning, 40B. I mean, it's a pretty long list.
Okay, well, I think that part of what we've been thinking about all along is we go to the trouble of passing ordinances, and then they go into the ether, and then we don't know what happens. So it's useful to find out. So I think that's what I think the thrust of your question.
Yeah, just a comment. I think that determining what should be collected and reported on and how often is the easy part. Getting it to where we can find it has always been a problem, and they're improving it. I think the IT department is working on it, but yes, it's a good idea to have a discussion about that.
Right, and then actually doing the collection of the data is really as far as I'm concerned, that's the big lift.
Yeah. And then I would actually even suggest that, it dovetails with the public education, because I sort of feel as if you gather the information and then having it in a place where people can look at it, reference it, and know that it is there would be an incredible thing. The one specific thing that I am really very desirous of is like what I'm seeing in Brookline, where they have an updated SHI inventory, and you can.
You want to say what an SHI is?
The subsidized housing inventory.
Okay, sorry.
So that then you can actually see where your total is, and it's actually a record that you can see, it's a beautiful thing. You can actually even see each of the projects and where they are, whether or not they're on or off. And it's a running total, and it runs by date. So something like that's, on the 40B page would be really great.
You just copy Brookline's.
I like
right
that.
There. The table is right there.
I'm getting a lot of questions on that too, and kind of tying into that, I think it would be really good for the planning department.
Councilor Wright, hang on a second.
Through the chair.
Just let me know you're about to speak, because Councilor Kelly Brown had his hand up, and I want to just recognize him and then come to you if you don't mind.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm looking at a screen and it's hard to see enough. Mr. Brown?
No, of course. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I only wanted to chime in with my wholehearted support for this kind of measurement and reporting. I think what your co-chair, Vice Chair Oliver was saying about, there's a complicated set of housing programs and lists, and I think to be able, I'm really concerned that people have been dramatically misled by the state's model for the MBTA housing, that's some kind of idea of production, that there's a real production associated with it, and of course there's not, right? It's just a model about that describes one way of using a measuring stick that we all live by, but the key, I think, is to understand where are we really getting the housing from, and if it's affordable housing, exactly how are we getting it? Is it through inclusionary zoning? Is it through 40B? What is it that's driving these things? And to have a common place to look on them, I think obviously is also important. So I really hope we pay a lot of attention to this and have something really robust.
Okay, thank you. Now, Councilor Wright, I'm sorry, I just want to make.
Oh, that's okay. One thing, getting back to this, in which I'm getting a lot of questions and emails about, is, now meeting our 10% of SHI, maybe planning could present next time what's the process now? If someone comes in with a 40B, which they still can come in with a 40B, but now what's the process? What will it be judged on? Is it just going to a special permit? Is it going to be the ZBA? Is it going to be, city council? Things like that, because there's a lot of questions and a lot of misinformation out there.
Well, we have a memo in the packet this weekend, as you know, about, the law department did an update on our standing, I think, towards the 10% or the 1.5% threshold, which indicates we're still not there, as I understand.
Oh, no, the mayor said, Barney, Mr. Heath said we've met it because they took out the building permit for Dunstan East. So my question to him was, it all 300 or the 200 and things like that? So we're over the number now.
Oh, we are.
So,
Okay, I thought
As of this morning.
This morning?
as of today, I believe.
I'm
So-
sorry, I'm behind the curve here. Okay.
So the question is, now that we've met it, and like I said, I'm getting a lot of emails, phone calls and things like that. It would be good to have, what's the process now for 40Bs coming into the city?
Okay. That's an item by itself, which I think is worthy of discussion. Okay.
I think that should be sooner than later, because that's right now.
Okay. Is Norton keeping track of all this?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, the next item in the category is progress being made on the Newton's Climate Action Plan. And then, Councilor Albright, you presented this, but it says Public Facilities Committee and Zoning Planning Committee. The committee hasn't made any, we haven't done
No,
it.
it's a request to do that.
Okay. So I wouldn't want to just say the committee's request yet, but the Public Facilities Committee, but just leaving aside who's asking for it. It says requesting an update from the sustainability team and appropriate staff on the status of implementing the climate action plan measures, expanding municipal energy efficiency and renewable energy programs as follows: Newton Power Choice participation rates, municipal power purchasing contracts for gas and electric, solar power purchase agreement including operational and PV, which is photovoltaic, installations under construction, municipal energy consumption, DOER, that's Department of Energy Resources, I think, report, Green Communities Grant funded efficiency projects to date, Energy Coach for our future program, and zoning ordinances both to increase building energy efficiency, renewables in the private sector, and foster development, sustainable development patterns. That's a lot. So
Big one.
that's a big one. So, but we have, for members of the public, the city council adopted a climate action plan, and we've been trying to find ways to follow up on that. And this is, I think, asking basically what's happening, right? And what are we doing to do? Planning department have any comment on this at all? Okay. All right, nobody online that I missed? Okay, next item, that's a big topic, obviously, and we'll take some thought about how to get at that. How will Newton capture report data with regard to development in MBTA and non-MBTA zones to gauge progress towards our goals? That's already been discussed, I think. But there's another item, Councilor Albright and Danberg requesting updates on any potential projects brought to the planning department under the new village center overlay. This is what you were asking about a minute ago. The update should include indications of interest and actual permits filed for which villages and in which zoning districts, number of stories and units. Basically, what's happened, right? Okay. Any comments on that? I mean, do we have a way of tracking that planning department, in a sense of when a building permit comes in, is it somehow able to locate so we know where it is? Is it in, or is it because they come through that particular gate, is it somehow are we able to do that, or is it just aggregated with other building permits?
Can we flag it?
Oh, yeah, and we're working closely with ISD right now to figure out the building permit process for the village center zoning. It may require its own application, or either way, we can flag it and do reporting.
Okay, because it'd be great if you could do that front end work so that it automatically happens rather than having to go back in and dig it out. So super, and the ISD folks, I'm sure, are working with you on that. They're the people on the front line with this. They're the one that are going to get the first. Will developers come through planning for some sort of review first before they do this?
That's the plan.
Okay, all The next item, this has already been discussed, but is what is the status of Newton's progress in reaching the required amounts of units of land area or units or land area devoted to affordable housing sufficient to avoid Chapter 40B bypassing Newton zoning? As again, you all are ahead of me. I haven't read today's mail, so we are now past that threshold, and so we need to find out what indeed, as Councilor Wright pointed out, is the next step or process. Any comments on this anymore? Okay, on the housing, as a general matter, housing is obviously a significant component of all these other items. This was one, may Newton devote CPA funds or other funds set aside for housing to aid Newton municipal and school employees to live in the city they serve, and if so, how? This is a version of workforce housing, and I put this down because I wasn't quite clear where our legal opportunities are. I know that I think we've had a conversation that for some federal money, I don't think we can make that choice, but I didn't know if there were other funds that we might give some opportunity, and if so, what? But does planning have anything to say about this now? I mean, we can explore it later, but I didn't know if this was an issue that you've examined or had a chance to think about.
Yeah, so Chair Baker, we're happy to respond to that. There's some nuance to that as the question lays out, but we can give you a full response on that.
Okay, all right, thank you. And then this is another one that's seen some discussion. May Newton limit the purchase of existing housing by investors to preserve the home buying opportunities for individuals and families, and if so, how? We've seen some concern in other parts of the country where investors are buying up housing, taking it actually out of service, sometimes renting it, sometimes not, but basically outbidding. And now obviously homeowners want to get the best price they can, and they're entitled to do that. But the question is, does that change the dynamic of allowing and helping people become homeowners? And is that something that we can or should be concerned about or not? Any comment on this one?
I think that goes to the law department first.
Yeah. Councilor Danbury?
I was just gonna say, I think we need to hear from the law department as to at what point this would become some form of restraint of trade.
Yeah, well, anything, yeah. Ms. Leminski?
I was just, I know other towns and cities have right of first refusal and condo conversion ordinances that deal more with 2, 3, and multifamily. I know you're probably talking about single family houses, but there's definitely activity with that.
Okay, so maybe there's some way to think about this. Again, it's part of the, and I confess I'm the person who wrote this one just to try and get ahead of a problem that seems to be in other places. Whether we can get ahead of it here and whether there'll be a problem here, I don't know, but that's the idea. That to the extent that we can anticipate something and rather than just respond to it, I'd like to do that.
It's a big problem on the Cape and Islands.
Oh, really? Okay.
Mr. Chair, so the law department will absolutely take this under advisement, just to temper expectations, as you know, as well as everybody on, or most people on ZAP, is that through zoning, we can't really regulate ownership. That is an issue. However, we're looking forward to working closely with you on potential alternatives and to explore what it is the city could do in this arena.
Okay, well, I appreciate that because we're going to require a lot of ingenuity, I think. Okay, and Mr. Triccarello, we have enforcement work by.
Wait, I have under the housing, I think here would be my housing production plan.
Yeah, you want to, I'm sorry, well, let's make sure we get that. Councilor Wright, I didn't see you raise your hand, so apologies. Say, what is it? Say again.
Under housing to add in, I'd like to investigate getting a housing production plan. We haven't done this and other communities have, and I don't understand why we don't.
Can you explain a little bit of housing production you mean by the city or by just private property owners, just so we understand what you mean?
No, it's by the city. And a lot of times when we do that, it checks off boxes by the state because we do have a plan for production and producing more housing and things like that.
You mean, but the city has a plan, but it isn't the city's housing that's being built. It's not like public housing we're talking about.
Correct.
Okay, I just need to understand what the thrust of your question is, that's all. Okay. Any comments from the planning department about, okay.
Director Heath has
Oh,
some-
Director
Just
Heath,
briefly on
sorry.
that, Chair Baker. So yeah, that is an option for a lot of communities that haven't met their 40B obligation. It's kind of a substitute that the state will accept for communities that are less than 10%. So again, this is another one we can kind of look at and provide a fuller response
Okay,
to the committee.
all right, thank you. Councilor Wright, anything more on that, or does that cover it for the time being?
No, that's fine.
Okay. Let me move on to enforcement by ISD. This is zoning compliance generally, special permit conditions. I just want to mention those two because we depend on ISD to make sure that the laws we pass in the form of our ordinances are complied with. And the Land Use Committee, and through the City Council passing the Land Use Committee recommendations, has lots of special permit conditions. And Mr. Ciccarello, I don't know if you're still here, but I think there's a great deal of interest in how this particular issue is dealt with by your department, because there's a lot of effort by the council to impose conditions, but if there's no way to make sure they're complied with, then it's difficult to say that it's a successful effort. Are you still here, or is he left?
I am still here.
Oh, good.
Yeah. For post conditions, it's very difficult to enforce, especially when the projects are all done and many years down the road. The only way we would typically know about this is usually through a complaint of some sort.
But does your new software give you a sense of what the conditions are so that you can look at a particular site and know these are the matters should be complied with, not just the general zoning, but the special permit conditions as such?
The only way we would be able to do that would be just through reading through the special permit and finding out whatever the compliances that they have to meet.
Well, I understand.
No other way to do it, even with the system. I mean, everything is uploaded to the project, but you know, we still have to read that special permit if we get a complaint to find out whether the address is in compliance or not.
But I guess what I'm asking is for your software, now if I go to look at a particular site where there might be a special permit, will the special permit now be part of the public record so that you can look at it, the building inspector can look at it, and everybody knows what the rules are? I mean, whether it's compliance or not is another story, but just not, you don't have to go rummaging through the files to find it. That's what we're trying to find.
No, it would be one of the uploaded attachments to the project.
Okay, and older ones are being brought in. I know that you were trying to get old projects into the system.
Yes.
Is that, we can talk about that more later, but that's, okay.
Yes, no, as we go through the files and we find a special permit or a variance, we're adding it to the addresses.
Okay, thank you. Next item is short-term rental compliance and possible amendments. This is item 2324. This is one that's actually been docketed, and so it's on our agenda, but I'm going to ask for a motion to hold after I read it. But it's update on short-term rental compliance, rental ordinance compliance and enforcement. Councilor Maliki, Wright, Kelly, Laredo, Lipoff, Humphrey, Lucas, Albert, Danberg, and Oliver requesting an update on the short-term rental ordinance compliance and enforcement, including data on registrations, complaints, investigations, and fines issued, types of violations being found, e.g. non-owner occupied, room limits, annual time limits, other code violations like noise, health, and safety, and trash, ability to compare short-term rentals registered with the city versus registered with the state, because there's a requirement there, versus listing on public platforms, ability to obtain listing information from short-term rental companies, adequacy of resources or other obstacles to enforcement. Okay, this is, I think, your department, Mr. Ciccarello, and that is there's a lot of interest in this, obviously. Councilor Wright, you want to say anything about this?
Well, you're saying hold, but are we gonna address it sooner than later? I know in
Part of
wards
what we can
1 and
talk,
3, we're having a lot of problems with this.
What Councilor Oliver and I will do after the meeting is try and sort out and work with planning to set up a calendar of what we can do. But this is one that just indicate a little bit about what problems you're seeing, because it's when you're saying urgency is here.
Well, there's a few up here, and as ISD knows, it takes a really long time to push these through, and we have a lot of irate residents. And so us understanding the process will help better communicating it to other people too.
Okay. Mr. Tricolo, we may try and get this sooner rather than later, just to try and think through and educate us all about. I realize it's a challenge sometimes to enforce all of these because you have a due process here, but we ought to understand what it is so people can respond to the questions constituents get raised with us. Any other comments? Yes, Councilor Albright.
This made me think of something that actually has to do with housing. I love accessory dwelling units, and I'd love to know, has the numbers started to increase, or is it the same slow, very slow development of ADUs?
Okay.
It's interesting to me that like now the state is trying, the
Well,
governor.
I've actually got that in lower down.
Okay, well, it has to do with housing. I mean, the
Yeah.
governor seems to think that ADUs are a panacea, and we're not finding it that in Newton, so I'd love to know more about is there anything that we can do to make it easier to create ADUs?
Okay. All right, and on the, but we'll come back to that. I think we've got that. The leaf blower ordinance, you all know that we passed an ordinance that updated to require registration, but it also is done by Mr. Ciccarello's department in the sense of enforcement. There's a part-time an inspector who's been, as I understand it, pretty successful in being visible in the field. There's still some lack of compliance I can testify to just from my own observation, but I think it's doing better. But I think, again, a report. Mr. Ciccarello, you want to say anything about this just at the moment?
Pretty much the only thing I want to say is that our part-time employee, Chuck Edrahai, does an extremely good job.
Great job.
Some of these landscapers will run and hide when they see him. He does an extremely good job. He's a great temperament. He's a retired Newton police officer. Very thorough in his investigations. I mean, unfortunately, I don't know if we'll ever get the leaf blower ordinance down to zero. I mean, I think there will always be people who violate, but the more and more we do this, I think the more and more the landscapers will be coming into compliance.
Are leaf blowers on the agenda for this committee?
No, but their department just does the enforcement, that's all.
Oh,
That's
okay,
all.
okay, I just was
Just
curious
wanted-
about
no,
that.
no, it's-
Yeah, we want to take that over.
Oh, no, please. I left that behind.
Street side fence approvals, this is just one I put down because I'm seeing some taller fences showing up on public streets. And we have an ordinance that basically says that if you're abutting a public street, you're supposed to be 4 feet high and no higher without some sort of special approval. And I don't know, Mr. Ciccarello, what you're seeing in terms of enforcement on that at this point.
Well, on street side fence approvals, you can be as tall as 6 feet as long as you're 2 feet back from the property line, as long as the top 2 feet of the fence are open, like a lattice or a spindle. I don't know if that's what you're talking about. We do have some violators who will put up a fence on their own without applying for a permit that we do enforce upon.
Okay. Anybody, any comments on this, any experience from, yeah, Councilman?
I've turned in a few, and that people have changed the fence.
Well, right, good for you. All right, energy conservation and climate, we've talked a little bit about this, but one item is what additional steps are required to continue the city's qualification of one of the 10 communities? For the public's benefit, there are a few communities in the state that have gotten special status in this area, and perhaps and there's also well, there's a separate item I'll come to in a second, but perhaps the planning department could enlighten us a little bit about where we are with that. Anybody?
Director Heath.
Director
Okay.
Heath.
Chair Baker. So the mayor docketed an item today to have the council take up the electrification ordinance that Ann Berwick and the sustainability team and many city councilors have been involved with for a number of years, since it's now been approved in terms of format and actual language by the DOER at the state. So it is ready to go and should be on the council docket for their next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Then an item, Councilors Albright, Leary, Danberg, and others requesting review and adoption of the electrification ordinance. That's basically what you just described.
Yeah, and Berwick got in touch with us early on, at the end of the term, and said, please redocket it, so that's why we did.
Okay.
So now we have an ordinance and the mayor is an ordinance, we should join them together.
This is a conversation offline, but I think that's important so we don't have dueling ordinances if we can, at least for consideration.
But that was fun with the trees, wasn't it?
It's the same ordinance, so it doesn't, this is gonna be a lot easier than that one.
That was, yeah, that didn't work.
Yeah, where's Councilor Krinsman
Yeah,
when we
really.
need him? Yeah. All right. I won't read the whole rest of that item then because it's, I think, the 10 communities item. And then what additional energy conservation electrification requirements should be considered for major projects and renovations? That may be covered by this, but it's just a
No, this is different.
different, okay.
This is the BERDO, the energy efficiency that we're working, that Bill Ferguson has been working with the business community buildings to do what Boston and Cambridge have done, is get them to report their energy use and then ultimately get them to make some changes in how they heat and cool and so forth their buildings.
Okay,
So
that's
this is
the
the
item,
BERDO.
right under, yeah, that's an item right under that one, but I think this is one we've discussed in the committee before, and
Yeah.
had a report.
Well, this is more than a report, hopefully they're coming up with some action items here.
Yeah, okay. All right, any other comments on energy conservation or electrification? Economic development, this is an item that, again, has been docketed, but we're not going, I'm going to ask for, when you get to the end, just a motion to hold the ones that have been formally docketed already. Item 2424, request for discussion and possible ordinance amendments relative to aiding small businesses impacted by development. Councilors Albright and Kelly requesting the Planning Department, with the assistance of the Economic Development Commission, research and develop mechanisms including ordinance changes or other means to assist local businesses impacted by development similar to the Somerville work. The goal of this docket item will be to help small commercial, retail, independent, and locally owned businesses remain in Newton as development occurs. So you want to say a word about this item?
Well, this is a carryover also from last term, and Somerville just published a report that they did a study and they published it just recently. We saw a draft of it earlier. So I think we should see if there's anything in there that we can pick up on. And I know that was a huge concern in the village center work that we did, that businesses felt like that they were gonna get thrown out and not be able to continue to do their small mom and pop businesses. So whatever we can do to help them is important.
Is there any just quick synopsis or update on that report?
I'm sorry, Councilor,
Sorry.
yes, yeah. I guess this is to Mr. Sisson.
Yeah, I attended a presentation on Ted Fields, and I think as the Harvard, the Kennedy School was actually involved with that as well. So we looked at it. I think there are questions about what resources can be put to bear, because it would require some city resources, and that's important. I would just ask one clarifying question on businesses impacted by development. During the discussions, I think, of village center zoning, there were sort of two completely separate impacts that we have discussed in the department, and one of them is temporary, and that's the construction impact mitigation. So when the construction is actually underway, how do we mitigate the effects on neighboring businesses, especially in the close quarters of a village center? And the other piece is more longer term, is like how do we, what policies can be put into place to try and prevent displacement of small businesses, so.
Would either of those require an adjustment or ordinance, or they?
Well, I think, you know, one of them is more, Anthony Ciccarelli, is the ISD would be covering more of the construction impact mitigation. And there are regulations in place that do provide some protection. And then for the other one, I think it's a question of which tools can be brought to bear.
Okay, well, that's a conversation that obviously will take some time, but we appreciate that. The complement to that is what additional measures are likely to be proposed to increase the vibrancy of new commercial development in village centers not part of overlay zones. As the members of the public may know, there were some village centers that were part of the proposal, but the council elected not to add those into the process, and we did not include them. But the question, at least independent of the rezoning, is what else can be done for those areas. I think that's, again, a conversation to be continued. Okay. Community preservation is just a generic question. What is forthcoming this term? And voila, we have item 2224, referred to zoning and planning and finance committees, CPC recommendation of appropriate $125,000 in CPA funding. This is to the Community Preservation Act. For members of the public who are watching, the Community Preservation Act is a provision of the law that allows 1% of Newton's property taxes to be devoted to specific purposes for open space, recreation, historic preservation, and affordable housing, or community housing, I think is the term. And so there's a recommendation for $125,000 of that funding in historic resource reserve funds to the Planning and Development Department for a grant to the Second Church in Newton for restoration. Members of the public and the committee may remember we did vote for work on the tower over in on Church Street, the Grace Church, which I think, to all accounts, turned out to be quite a successful exercise. This is somewhat in the same vein. I have left a message with the Chair of Finance to ask whether we could maybe do this in a joint meeting so that we don't have two meetings on this. And if our preservation plan, I can't see it's still on the screen, but I hope that we can figure out a way to do that expeditiously. And we'll see if we may be able to do it even at the next meeting.
Can I just raise
Yeah.
something here? And there was a Globe editorial recently, I think it was a Globe editorial opinion, that community preservation money should be, more of it should be spent on housing than it is. And it was imploring the cities and towns that have CPA money to put more of it into housing. The kind of thing that I'm wondering if we should at least talk about it. We should have a conversation about it.
Well, we certainly can. I do think that there was, the last time I recall a discussion, it was somewhat even, but the housing trust was going to increase. I thought we were increasing some of the share to housing as part of that, but I can't remember specifically. We'd have to.
I think they get 35%, is that, yeah, 35%? So,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
the question is, do we want to do more or not?
Yeah.
Just to have that conversation.
Okay.
Is it only 35%? I thought it was higher.
Well, they need, this is Pam, I have my hand up.
That's all right. I'm sorry, and our preservation planner is here. I'm sorry, Ms. All right.
So I think it's a minimum of 10%, we do 35%, and for each of the areas, but I think that article in the Globe was talking about that those cities and towns were only using 10% towards their housing, but we do use pretty evenly, I believe, and Ms. Hutchings will be better at it, but I think we do 35% for each of those areas. If anything, I think the historic portion of it may be a little less.
Ms. Hutchins, you want to add anything to that?
I do just want to confirm that it is 35%, and I believe that was also the case in the prior year to the Housing Trust. And we are also, I should say, the CPC is meeting tomorrow night to sort of discuss our beginning of the year and our goals. So I'm happy to take down anything and pass it on to them as well.
I think there's at least a question about whether there's we can do more. You know, obviously part of the challenge is that it's committed to 4 different purposes, and we know already that there are other claimants on those funds, but that's certainly a question for them to examine. They make the first call, we don't anyway. I mean, we vote it once they make that decision. Okay, thank you. And then this is a question again, which is informational. What is the current balance available for projects not already set aside, and what is set aside by category for open space, recreation, housing, and historic preservation? In other words, what pots of money are still earmarked? There are some, my memory is that 10% for each is sort of a dedicated fund, and then the balance of 60% is available in a sense to be allocated across the various categories. Is that correct?
It is correct, except that the housing is set aside at 35%, which is given to the trust at the beginning, which has already been done for this fiscal year.
Okay. All right. But it would be useful at some point, and when we take up the item on the second church, maybe you just, as part of that, explain to us where the other funds are going and how they're being spent. We don't need it tonight. And then an item, Councilors Danberg and Albright requesting periodic progress reports on establishing the Municipal Affordable Housing Trust. We have a new vehicle in the city that's really getting up and running. And I guess the thrust of this is to ask what's happening, right?
Yeah, we just want to get a report periodically as to what the status is and what's happening within that category.
Okay. Next item is response to state legislation. It says preserving our accessory apartment ordinance is recently amended. This is one I put down because the state proposal would be to say that anyone could build an accessory apartment as of right, whereas it would take away one of the provisions that I personally find important in Newton is the idea that it be owner occupied, because that helps prevent the corporatization of this particular opportunity. But that's one that we don't have within our authority, that's the state's, but I just think it's important that we keep it in mind. Now, Councilor Albright may want to do something different from that, but I think the point is that we ought to decide our own future as much as possible rather than have the state decide it for us. That's.
I just want to find out what we can do to get more of them. Is there anything that we can do to make it easier?
All right. So we'll have an opportunity to take that up, I think, at some point. Recodification, this is something we're working on with the clerk's office, again, just to get our ordinances updated, nothing very controversial, it's more informational. Public education, a Newton zoning primer for the public. Again, maybe the department can help with this in thinking about how we educate the public just on zoning in general, because again, the degree to which people are unaware of this is really quite striking. But Newton is a city, I just want to comment for my perspective, having seen other situations. You know, we still do not have lots of gated communities like the Southwest. This is still a public space that all of us occupy, and the zoning provides that sense of community for us, and part of the value of that is that it does, I think, put a big responsibility on the public to understand what the rules are. But we got to help them do that. So I don't know exactly how we do that and do it more effectively, but it seemed to me worth thinking about. And then, again, the community outreach, occasional public information on other matters. Excuse me.
No. I just actually used quite a bit, and I don't know, there was a primer. There was actually a zoning code, it was like a little pamphlet that was probably 6 pages, 8 pages, that was circulated. And that was the beginnings of, I think, a really good document. And I actually would appreciate seeing one for the Village Center overlay, so that then that becomes another ability to hand out to people.
This is something we currently have. I apologize, I didn't know we had it.
Yeah,
So maybe one of the things, the next time you come, you might show us what you've got.
Yeah, I think you're referring to a pamphlet that some previous staff worked on with Newton North students, more about zoning more generally, to create a kind of very user-friendly introduction. It's fairly high level. And then we might have some similar short summary documents for the village center zoning as well
This was-
that can be made available.
Yeah, this one is very basic, and it just described terms. It was 101. You know, it was really very nice to be able to hand to somebody.
Well, one of the problems that we've all encountered, I suspect, I don't know about, speak for my colleagues, is somebody comes in and they say, gee, I didn't know that I couldn't do A, B, and C, you know, and they say, wait a minute, part of our responsibility is to educate the newly arrived public what the rules are, because we constantly run into people who say, wait a minute, I didn't know this. And, yeah, Councilor O'Brien?
Oh, go ahead.
Just gonna, to follow up on Raina's comment. I remember that document. I'm not sure I know where to find it now. Where did you come upon it, and maybe we could circulate it?
Yeah, I'll hand it to you. Yeah. Let me open this up and I'll give it to you.
Well, I think we can make sure that maybe attached to the report, at least.
Right.
We can have a copy.
Yeah, that would be a good idea.
Right.
Attach it to the report.
Right. So at least we know what we have, yeah.
I don't mean to harp on ADUs, but I was just recently trying to help a couple that are working their way through the process of getting one. And I really think, you know, everybody that I spoke to here says, there's no point in doing a pamphlet because every case is different. But on the other hand, if you don't know that there are building rules, if you don't know that there are zoning rules, I don't think people here understand how ignorant everybody else is about all these rules, and just putting a few basic things down on a piece of paper and letting them see it, it really could help a lot.
It's the starting point.
Yeah.
And again, I think, we can work with the real estate community and all that, but you all have run into situations where people come in and buy something and say, oh, I didn't know that I couldn't, or, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
So, good idea. Let me just comment about committee process. This is just to inform everybody. Ms. Norton really is very important to helping us keep on track about committee preparation, and if anything, there's a question, because all of us have, as you just heard earlier tonight, other things we do with our lives during the day in most cases that we need some time to do those, and we depend on our staff to help us get it put together. What I want to just indicate, the process of putting agendas together, the practice in the past was to meet with the planning department, and to the extent the law department is needed as well, a week before the committee meetings to put the agenda together. I plan to do that with the vice chair and trying to figure out as much as possible an agenda to move our conversation along. So you just sort of think backwards a little bit when we get there. And we want the reports to be as factual as possible so that the public can be informed about what we're doing. We can all argue about the policy and the opinion, but I want to just make sure that at least we record what we're doing. As much as possible, I appreciate the fact that we have several members of the planning board and the planning department here in person. And certainly those of you who can attend in person, I understand, but as much as possible, to the extent that we can meet in person, it's great to see you here, because I think that it's an opportunity for the public to see you as well in a different context. Just on committee member attendance, if you can attend, if you can let Ms. Norton know so that we can make sure we've got a quorum, we don't miss a vote on something important. When we get to public hearings, I want to try and figure out a way to provide some advance notice about the process. You know, the number of minutes, how we sort of set up. I'll be open to suggestions from people about how we can make that as efficient, but also let people have a sense that they're going to have an opportunity to be heard, and how we do that. In the old days, you walked into the city chamber and you signed up on the piece of paper, and that was how it was done. And then we have online people who want to testify, and somehow figuring out a mechanism. And I'm open to suggestion about how to do that, because we don't want people not to be able to testify who physically can't get to City Hall, but at the same time, we want to honor the folks who've gone to all the trouble to show up. And so I want to work with the vice chair, but a member of the committee or the planning department has suggestions about that. I'm open to those, because we will get to that. And then I just want to, I'm saying The legal constraints on zoning ordinances, let me just comment. Again, this is part of the sort of education, not only of ourselves, but the public, but just for general purposes, a zoning ordinance change has a particular lifetime with which it mattered. Once it's docketed for public hearing, we have, it's got to be decided within 90 days or it dies, or it has to be reheard. That's different from a special permit, where if you don't grant a special permit within 90 days of the public hearing, it's automatically granted as of right. And so we just want to keep track of that kind of issue. Uniformity requirements is just a matter of state law that basically says you've got to have some general practice, not just doing something on an individual basis that makes no sense. The variable council votes just refers to the fact that zoning ordinances generally require a 2/3 vote of the council, but if it's a housing related item, because of the change in the law, a simple majority, and keeping track of which is which. And then, of course, the role of the planning board. We're honored to have the members here who advise us about all of the zoning changes. And so that's an important part of our process. Any comments on that from anybody? Anything we've left out just to sort of inform people? Pre-department budget interview, department interviews and questions. Planning, inspectional services, and CPA administration. We're going to talk about CPA next time, and we may be able to get into this. But we all know that the budget process is somewhat accelerated. What I've hoped to be able to do is, and I've talked to Mr. Ciccarello about this and Mr. Heath, is to have the departments talk a little bit more in advance about what they do and us, so that we can think about what resources they need, how we can advocate for them if they need them, because we are dependent on them to do the kind of staff work that we can't do ourselves. That's a topic that I'm not sure exactly how we play it out, but I think it's wonderful that Mr. Ciccarello is here with his colleague and as well as the planning department, because that is an opportunity for them to see and be seen. And then there's a special item that Councilor Albright raised about parking minimums. The question is, we have parking minimums reduced. We've reduced parking minimums in the VCOD areas. And the question is, should we extend that to non-VCOD villages? That's a policy choice we have to make. And those are the items that I've got. Is anybody, Councilor Wright, have we not talked about anything that you wanted to add? You're muted, I think.
Dane has her hand up.
There you go.
Yeah, I would like to add to, under the parking heading, it would be great if we could think about the scenario where we actually gain development in the village center areas without parking included on site. What our planning is for parking options, or potentially to help to make it possible for new housing development to come in with parking decoupled from the housing, for the sake of affordability of new housing and for the design of village centers. We had a lot of discussion about parking requirements for the village centers, with the understanding that if we don't require parking, developers will still include parking. And I think they probably will if there aren't other options. For many people, I think that's like the ideal, is there will just be on-site parking. But I think there are a lot of reasons for us to think about what the incentives are around that, and if there are ways for developers to build new housing with parking decoupled. It has a lot of different public benefits. So I would like to be thinking about what are the options for parking that would be off-site for new housing development.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Dane. Councilor Wright, just to come back to you, did we get all your items?
Yes,
Okay.
you did. Thank you.
Anybody else? Councilor Getz.
I just wanted to ask, whether or not there's any possibility of being informed of the process in ISD for the village center overlay. You had mentioned that you're starting to work with ISD, and I don't know how that, whether or not that's a public discussion or whether or not that's counselors coming in and sort of being informed about your process, but I really would appreciate that because it's helpful when we're explaining it to the public how that happens. So some sort of, opportunity to come in either in small groups or.
We can provide an update on that here.
Well, I think,
It'd be a good idea.
I'm always reminded when a friend of mine who went to business school said, imagine your can of pea, but your pea cannery, what happens to the pea when it goes through, where's it, it all comes, so I mean, this is not the exact analogy, but the theory is that somebody starts a process, and where does it go from there, right? That's what you'd like to know.
Yes.
Okay.
We're working on materials too for staff, for external, information geared towards property owners, developers, architects, et cetera. So we can, come back and provide updates to this committee on what that process looks like, sort of the technical side of things, as well as provide any information that we've produced.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments from anybody on the planning board or the planning department or the committee or the council that you want to add? If not, I would entertain a motion to hold the items that are.
I would move hold everything but 22, 24.
There he is. Good for you.
Nailed it, right?
You haven't lost your touch.
Yeah. So there's a motion to hold 21, 22, 24, 23, 24, 22, 24, 24, 24, and 22, 24, I think, yeah. 21 through 22, 24, 24.
We're not holding 22, 24. Aren't we taking that one up or no?
No, we're not discussing any of them tonight. 21, 24 we're doing, I'm sorry, it's 22 through 24.
22, 23, and 24.
22 through 24.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
All those in favor of the items we are not discussing tonight, say aye.
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 Hold, thank you, opposed? So those items are held. Thank you all, and I think that I would entertain Councilor Princeman, a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, members of the planning board, planning staff, inspectional services, law department, and all others attending. Councilor Oliver and I will take these, working with the clerk, and try and produce a sort of a work plan for us. It'll take a couple of times to do this because of, I want to get at least started in CPA, but it may take a couple of meetings to get on our sort of systems up and running, but bear with us.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Welcome back.
I never.